We are in chapter 6. Now we're dealing with the psychological. At one point, we're dealing with the social and all these other social factors. Now we're dealing with the mind. The type of mind game that we play in our daily living. The theory of planned behavior. Now, this theory makes the assumption that we do certain things that our attitude is positive about. If your attitude is positive towards being healthy, you will likely do it. It's an assumption. And also, your subjective norms. Subjective norms are those people who mean a lot to you. Your parents, your friends, your teachers, your pastors. See, those are people that you value. Their opinion of you values a lot. And if they support your attitude, or they support what you want to do, or you think they will support what you want to do, you are much more likely to do it. And at times also, your perceived behavioral control. Do you have the will, the strong will? Do you have that inner fight or that inner strength to say, I am going to do this? I am not going to smoke for the rest of my life. Or I'm not going to drink alcohol in excess because my attitude towards drinking alcohol in excess is not good. And therefore, I'll not want to do it. And besides, I don't want my parents to know that because I don't want to put them in shame. And I have the power to say, no, I'm not going to do it. See, these are all things that when you talk about behavior, they're very, very important for you to take into consideration. All of this combines to produce behavior intention. Either you want to do it or you don't want to do it. The greater the intention to engage in a particular behavior, the more likely the behavior will happen. If your behavior, your intention is stronger not to smoke, you are likely not to smoke. Your behavior intention is not to use drugs, you are likely not to use drugs. Your behavior intention is not to engage in irresponsible sexual behavior, you are likely not to engage in sexual behavior. It's the intention. The stronger it is, the more the probability for you not to. So now you have protection motivation theory. Now, this theory says has some similarities with the components of the health belief model and the theory of planned behavior. Proposes that Behavior intention results from two types of appraisal: the threat appraisal and coping appraisal. This results in an adaptive changing behavior or maladaptive avoidance denial response. So most of the time you adapt. You don't check you make sure that you engage in certain behaviors that will help you not to engage in behavior that is going to create problems for your health. You have protection motivation theory. Central feature is fear. As the word says, protection motivation. When you are afraid of something, see, don't ever take away the fear. If you are afraid that I am afraid, if I eat too much fatty food, I will be obese. And I'll be developing things like hypertension, diabetes, and this. That fear factor alone will discourage you from engaging in it. But if you don't have that fear, you don't care, most of the time you don't. So most of the time, our behaviors are also influenced by the sort of fear we have against certain outcomes. Relevant, where people may be fearful for their health. But too much fear, high level of anxiety, might cause people to disengage. Too much appropriate fear is good. Too much fear is too much. Stages of change. Now, when you want to change your behavior, you go through stages. Now, these are the stages: the pre-contemplative contemplation phase. Pray before even you start thinking about, I want to really change my diet so that I control my blood pressure, so that I do away with some of the salty diet. Pre-contemplating. And most of the time, you look for those things that can really support you. Why do you really want to do it? Those things that you are afraid of really developing. Because some of those also are things that needs to be taken care of. Then you come to the contemplation phase. Now I am really ready to do what it takes. I'm really ready to engage in this behavior change. I'm ready to making sure that I stick to a diet that can reduce my salt intake, my fatty intake, and also engage in some exercise. Then you have the preparation. You prepare that you are really ready. And those who are preparing, if you are the one preparing your meal, you make sure you take care of less salt, less fatty food, and engage in physical activities. Then you have actions, what you do on a daily basis. You make sure you don't eat fatty food. You make sure you don't eat salty food. You engage in physical activities. You maintain your emotional health. Avoid stress or stressful situations that you can avoid, and you go with it. You try to maintain it. Yes, there are certain times wherein people relapse. In fact, there is this saying, people who have attempted to quit smoking, they have attempted about 7 times, and the 8th time they succeed. It's not everybody that can cold turkey, Oh, today I'm going to stop smoking, and there you go, I do stop. Some people have to try because, again, that is the behavior that they have been practicing for a long time. That is the behavior that helped them to relax when they are stressed or when they are feeling bad. And these are the type of food the taste buds have been used to. And so it's not as easy as turning on the light and turning it off. Most of the time, it's like you slowly dim the light, slowly, 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 then boom, goes off. And at times, you give yourself time. When you relapse, don't think you failed. It's just go back, try. Because if you believe strongly that this behavior change is something that you want to do to improve your health for reasons, most of the time, some people say, I'm going to do this for my child, for my kids, for my family. And it's a big commitment. And to be able to do it, you have to go through some of those challenges. And most of the time is when you say you're not going to try to replace it with something else that is healthy. Because by saying I'm not going to do this, then you create a void. We don't do too well when there's a vacuum. You substitute it with something that is healthy, that brings you pleasure. Utility of behavior change model are useful for providing some insight into why people behave in certain ways. Are useful for planning health promotion interventions. There is evidence to suggest that lifestyle interventions can be successful in promoting behavior change at an individual life, at an individual level. It's a lifestyle, it's lifestyle modifications, lifestyle changes. Most of the time, say for instance, you want to stop smoking. Don't surround yourself with people who smoke. Makes it difficult. See, you have to make some adjustment. Don't say, oh, well, I want to stop eating fatty food. Don't surround yourself or go to places where fatty food is being produced or prepared. And at times also, the key issue here also is moderation. There are certain behaviors, there's no moderation. Smoking, there's nothing like, well, I smoke in the weekends. No, just stop. Because smoking in the weekend is just as bad as smoking every day. Just stop. And also, some people say, oh, I drink alcohol in the weekend. How much of it? Because it does more damage also to your system. Just stop. Understanding the components and processes involved in health behavior can assist in this in designing health promotion interventions, which have a great chance of success. Understanding the components and processes involved in what makes you do that behavior. There are triggers. Certain things, okay, like some people, when they are stressed, they tend to smoke more. When they are stressed, they tend to eat more and drink more. So you have to make sure that, okay, first of all, deal with those stressors. What are those things that are really stressing that individual that makes them wanting to drink more, wanting to smoke more, wanting to do other things, some of those things that are not helpful to their health. Because one thing you have to know, our behavior does not just exist in a vacuum. There are certain factors that trigger some of those or encourage or motivate those kind of behaviors. So we have to know those and deal with those. And once we're able to deal with those triggers, those motivators, that friend who keeps bringing you that alcohol, that cigarette, whatever, once you slowly encourage that friend to stop it, give that friend the reason why you want to stop. With time, if that friend really respects your relationship, that friend will stop supplying you or creating all those environment that makes you smoke. And eventually you might be able to even help him to stop smoking and follow your behavior, your healthy behavior. Okay. There are always, people always criticize criticisms of theory of health psychology. One thing that you have to bear in mind is in life, even the best thing, there's always somebody that is going to criticize it. And depending on your religious beliefs, some people even try to criticize God. So the idea of criticizing, finding loopholes, finding weaknesses, is not a far-fetched notion. And at times, some of these things are better because they end up making things even better. It's not all criticism that is bad. When it's done for the right reasons, for the right intent. It makes whatever is being criticized better. Focus on individual level rather than wider determinants of health. Well, again, it's at the individual level, and the individual exists in a community, in a country. So most of the time, yeah, even though the focus is at the individual, but in reality, it could be much better if there's some of these are also expanded to the wider community. The reductionist approach can lead to victim blaming. Do not take an holistic approach to understanding health behavior. So many things. A behavior does not just exist caused by one thing. It's caused by so many things. They promote individualism and individual responsibility for health. Most of the time, it's easier said than done, especially when you're talking about those situations wherein the behavior that is expected requires resources, requires access. Some people don't have the resources and therefore lack access. So most of the time, they're really trying to improve their behavior as individuals is a much, much stronger challenge. Because if they don't have the resources, it's very difficult for them to engage in those health promoting behaviors that could lead to good health. Say, for instance, a child who is growing up in an environment wherein the only store is the convenience store that has all these food products that are really not good for his or her health. Or this kid grows up in an environment wherein you have all the various type of drug and alcohol stores, cheap alcohol being sold around. Instead of having YMCA's, healthy packs, you have stores that are selling alcohol and fatty food, salty food. Again, at times, it's not as easy. Can be done, but it's a much more difficult challenge than a kid who is growing up in an environment where they have grocery stores. They have fresh fruits, a variety of produce, can select. They have raw meat, not some of these that have been pasteurized, that have been, you know. So these are some of the challenges. Neglect the role of things like past behavior, habits, emotions, and culture. Simplify behavior change. Do not take into account time. In terms of research, a number of difficulties have been highlighted, including problems defining individual construct, limited predictive utility, a weak relationship between intention and behavior, argues that other factors should be explored, environmental factors as well, a lack of standardization across constructs in experimental designs. Much of research using the model relies on self-report measures, which have limitations. Whilst many of the models draw up aspects of sociological, psychological, and anthropological theory, they tend to neglect political and economic theories. Health action. Two key sections. Factors influencing health behavioral intention. Three interacting systems. One's belief system, motivation system, and normative system. Your motivation, your belief system, your own attitude. Motivation system, what motivates you, what makes you, who are those kind of individual that keeps you going? What are some of the things that makes you believe the way you believe? And some of those normative systems. Two, factors influencing whether an intention will translate into action. So because most of the time, yeah, there is the likelihood for intention to result into action. But there are certain times wherein there are other factors that might make it impossible, or that might make it difficult for people to have a positive action, positive intention, and transfer that positive intention into positive action. Factors which facilitate behavior change, such as supportive environment, skills, and knowledge. Critical perspectives. Challenge the notion of behavior. Refer to social practice or actions. Challenges mainstream assumptions and understanding. Take into account the social, the political, and the economic context and issues of power. So all of these things are just as important. And you have the summary. Health psychology is a sub-discipline within psychology, which can help us to understand how and why people behave the way that they do and make the choices that they make, in relation to health. Please, I want you to understand this clearly because this might show up somewhere. The health psychology is a sub-discipline within psychology, which can help us to understand how and why people behave the ways that they do and make the choices that they make in relation to health. Health behavior is complex and influenced by many different factors. It's not only one thing. It's complex. It's just like the human being. We are complex beings. There are so many things that really influence certain behaviors. For some, one thing that might influence one person behaving this way is completely different from the other person. So making that whole assumption that, well, because this, therefore, we are individuals. We also, that's why we have to be really, if you are really going to work with people to change their behavior, you first of all have to know what is that behavior and why is the person engaged in that behavior. What do they stand to benefit or what do they stand to lose? How is it going to be challenging for them to change? And how easy will it be? Or what resources do they need to be able to do that change? Models of behavior change can help in designing intervention to enable people to change their health behavior. Critical health psychology offers an alternative perspective. Okay, now please again read the chapter. Make sure you really understand the chapter. Study,